the most interesting conversation you've ever had in your entire life. And you end up just sitting here for 8 hours straight, just glued into the conversation. That could happen.
That's what I'm anticipating. It's off to a pretty slow start so far.
Okay, well, I'm setting the white balance still, so give me a second. Everything looks good, except I'd say we need the white balance is off. Nick would not forgive me if I didn't walk over here and go.
I understand.
We're going down to 5,000. And they better match. Because that's just the way it's going to be. No. Okay, there's you looking good. There's me looking good. You feel good?
Yeah, feel fine.
Okay. I'm going to set us on autopilot. It says, it always does 10 seconds. I feel like that's a bit much. I always switch it to 15.
Yeah. Very rarely am I doing something compelling for 10 seconds at a time.
You play music for a living.
But I don't think you need to zoom in on me for like 4 bars. 1 or 2 bars is good.
It depends on the tempo of the song, I guess.
Well, particularly like a rhythm section, you get the idea when you look over there.
Well, welcome to the Conspiracy Dad podcast, Dave. How are you?
Pretty good. Freshly showered. Just got done helping my folks with clearing branches, man.
I thought you were going to say done kicking ass at the gym.
Not today.
Not today.
Nope.
Did you guys have a lot of, for people that don't know, Tulsa, we got a pretty big storm.
Yeah.
It was kind of like a wimpy tornado over the whole city. You know what I mean? It was like, normally a tornado is like one specific neighborhood gets hit. But this was just like it was more like a hurricane. Yeah. It was like kind of the whole city. It wasn't, it was like 80, 90 mile an hour winds, but it was like kind of everywhere.
Yeah, I guess I would say, yes, it was a wimpy tornado, but a wimpy tornado makes for a very strong thunderstorm. You know,
that's why I've always thought hurricanes are crazy.
Because of
Have you had that experience where people,
wide they are?
Well, like people that don't live around like Oklahoma, Kansas, they're like terrified of tornadoes, and they're like, "Oh my God, how do you even live there?"
Yeah,
and they're like from Florida, and you're like, you live somewhere where you know every year,
go like 30, 40 miles wide, right? I mean,
it takes out the whole city.
Yeah,
you have to. They all evacuate. That's what seems crazy to me. And then I always try to tell them, like, you know, in Oklahoma, like we could have a tornado go through this neighborhood. Mm-hmm. It could take out my neighbor's house and not even touch mine.
They're a little more.
So your chances of getting hit are way, way less than you live in, you know, East Coast somewhere where you just know, like, you board up the house because you know it's going to be.
And they seem to hit in some of the same areas, like Moore, Oklahoma. Not a great place to buy a house.
No.
Because every 10, 12 years, you're going to get leveled.
I think it has something to do with, like, it's like some sort of Indian graveyard or something. There's some curse.
Oh, yeah.
I forget there's a curse connected to it. But obviously, if you're in Oklahoma, there has to be Indian ghost stories connected to any disaster that happens. Mm-hmm. There's a reason for it. It didn't just happen in a vacuum. You know what I mean?
I think you're right. You
didn't just get hit by the tornado.
I was here just minding my own business on what used to be someone else's land.
Yeah.
And then the gods smited me for no reason at all. That's kind of like kids will do. You know, you hear the older sibling, ow! And you walk in and go, what happened? And the younger one hit him. For no reason at all. I was just trying to help her.
You sound like you're headed into a dad story or a dad advice, which we decided we're gonna kick off the Conspiracy Dad with dad advice instead of conspiracy advice.
This didn't have anything to do with my particular dad advice, but siblings are, and it's one of the things is I'm an older sibling, so watching my boy when he pokes and prods at his sister and gives her a hard time. It's weird. You ever watch your kid do something that it's a compulsive thing. Like they can't not resist. They cannot resist the impulse to do the thing they're about to do. And like,
especially when they're like breaking something.
Yeah.
And you're like, why did you do that? And they don't know. They have no idea why. And you're like, You just decided to break it. I mean, actually, you didn't even decide. I think it's a demon at that point. Like, there's like some little devil on your shoulder telling you, break it. It's your dad loves it. Just break it. What's going to
happen? Just keep.
Just pick at it.
You're this far in.
I won't name names, but I had like a brand new pair of boots. Brand new. Nice boots. Nice cowboy boots with a nice sheen on the top of it. And I come in and look at it, and one of them is just scratched. Like multiple times on the top of it. And the child that will remain nameless, I'm like, what are you doing? And the child's just... Okay, you narrow it down to a she. Yeah. She didn't know. She had no answer. It was just like I don't know. It was just shiny, and I just started scratching it. And you're like, I'm so mad right now. But I believe that she had no reason. I think that it was demonic. I think that
it starts younger than I expected. My daughter is 6 and sprayed the car with sunscreen, which is not that big of a deal. But
like a lot.
Yeah, it was kind of a lot, but it was just one of those, like, you walk into the garage and you see this weird film all along the side of the car, right at eye level for her. You walk back in and you say, hey, it looks like something got sprayed all over the car. Do you know anything about that? And then, of course, she goes,
That's the mistake. No. You're talking to them like a human. You can't. They're not human.
Watching her lie was weird, too, like, because she's young enough to where that kind of is a new thing. And she goes, no, I don't know. And I was like, for a moment, I paused, like, maybe she didn't do it. Why would a person do that?
Maybe it was a ghost. I don't know.
And then she hasn't quite learned to stick with the lie. So it wasn't very long before she's like, yeah, well, me and Leo, we decided to go out and, we just wanted to see what would happen. And I thought, yeah, well, that, I mean, doesn't make sense to me as a grown man, but I get that you're a kid and that's what happened. Yeah.
It happens.
Scratching the boot. You kind of you're just investigating.
There's no reason. But at the same time, I'm sure I did like 50, probably 100 things like that I couldn't tell you why. I remember once I was at a buddy's place. We were out in the woods. It was like a campground. We found a bunch of old bottles. And we just started smashing them. It's like, why?
Totally.
Why not? You know?
Because they're bottles.
And I remember looking up and it's like, there's broken glass everywhere. It's like 30, 40 bottles we just smashed. And every time, it just felt so good to just go.
Yeah, that still feels good.
Yeah.
Maybe after this, we'll go out and...
Let's go break some bottles.
Sounds good. There's a picture on my folks' refrigerator of my brother and I when we're my kids' age, like 8 and 4, 8 and 5-ish. And we're both smiling and we're in matching clothes, like matching polos. We're headed to like an Easter party or something, which thanks, Mom, for documenting that. Bowl cuts and matching spring-colored polos. But we're both smiling, and that picture, I always look at it. I mean, my whole life I've looked at it and thought I was not happy in that picture because just right before it was taken, I did one of those things like a kid will do where you take your finger and you scoop a big dollop of frosting and lick the frosting. Because we're taking a picture with like the cake my mom had baked to go to whatever Easter party we're about to go to. And that's probably the only time I can remember doing that thing as a kid where you just like, the parents are getting on to me.
Go ahead and come in. If you're going to come in, we're talking about you. You can sit with me as long as you're quiet. Okay? Come here.
So I remember that moment, my parents getting on to me like, why did you ruin the cake? And in that moment, just not having a real, like, because it was there.
I think it's demons.
I think you're right.
Probably goes back to the blood trough at some point.
Oh, for sure.
So what was your dad's story or dad advice specifically for this episode?
The one that, funny when you're like thinking on stuff you want to teach your kids, I'm sure that more often than not, it's something you're trying to teach yourself,
like something that you're like, I should have not done that, or like trying to make them better than you.
Maybe you procrastinate a lot, and so you really get on your kids about procrastinating a bunch, right? And
okay.
So my coach at my gym made the comment a few months ago, like, if you work diligently, if you are consistent, your skills have no choice but to improve. And I kind of latched onto that phrase because it's not just for like one skill. It's anything you do. If you work at it consistently, your skills have no choice. Like you're literally willing them into submission if you just keep every day, kind of chipping away at this skill set, whatever it is. If it's learning an instrument, if it's learning a language, if it's
playing with a snake,
if it's playing with a snake, if it's snake charming, there you go. Just stay with it every day, and your snake charming skills have no choice but to improve.
That's like just tenacity, like the guy who doesn't quit is the guy who wins,
That's right.
And like how do you eat an elephant?
Yes.
One bite at a time,
and I think about it as a dad. How do you get better as a dad?
All right, go be good.
I don't think that you talk to guys before they have kids. Oftentimes it's kind of like, I don't know, man. I'm not ready for kids. And I think you should wait till you're ready to some degree, but at some point you got to just jump in the pool,
Yeah.
It's not like you read enough books and you go prepared, ready to go.
Well, too, because you have your first and you're like freaking out about everything. Mm-hmm. And then by the second, you're like, it's not so
bad.
Just having a baby,
Yeah, or you at least know that like whatever comes up, there's no way to prepare for whatever unexpected thing's about to come up. So you just kind of generally have to be prepared. Yeah. And so, being consistent as a dad to me is not necessarily having all the answers, but just consistently trying to engage them in conversation, and constantly like being aware of how the game is changing. That's something that always surprises me, is that we get in these like 3-month modes and the kids are growing. Kids develop so quickly that it feels like just when I get a handle on how to like navigate, they're really compliant when I explain it to them this way. 2 months later, that trick doesn't work anymore. You got to retool and come back.
But the main idea you're talking about is that the idea of consistency across the board, commitment to whatever it is you're doing. And like if you it's kind of like just having that goal, like having a goal, aiming at that goal. It doesn't really matter what you're doing, working at it, working on those skills, it's going to get better.
The thing that I hear my son say a lot, and I don't think he's the only 9-year-old boy that says this, but this attitude of, well, I wasn't born awesome at this, so what's the use in working at getting better at it? And so, to your point, it's you're rephrasing it the way that what I mean is, nobody's born awesome at pretty much anything. Some people are gifted in some ways.
I've heard that's a sign of studies of successful people versus highly skilled people versus not. And there's this weird thing where highly successful people assume that they're going to be bad at what they start doing.
I like that.
It's like whatever it is they're doing, they're not surprised at all that they fail.
Yeah.
Like they just go, wait, it's my first time. It's the first one. And then there's a majority of the population, or a lot of people, they don't ever move forward because they're waiting to be perfect at it and they're afraid of failure. Or the first time they do something, they step out on the mat to spar or something and they get obliterated and they quit immediately because they just go, well, I'm obviously not good at this. Yeah. If I was good at it, I would have won. Yeah. I didn't win. So, teaching your kids to expect failure is really important.
Yeah.
Because you're going to fail like way more than you win.
It's
just natural.
Like the Bay Area tech industry, that's the saying of like move fast and break stuff, fail fast, that sort of stuff. So I think that's a really good phrase, that successful people go into it expecting to fail at first.
Yeah. And obviously you might fail so bad that you reassess whether or not you're in the right ballpark. But
when I tried out for the basketball team my freshman year, everybody knows the story of Michael Jordan getting cut and then he comes back and he becomes Michael Jordan. I went to try out and there was no, every indication was you're not going to be Michael Jordan, even if you work really hard and come back next year. So that was when I dialed back on basketball. But there are things that you're going to find you're not born to do, but don't let one failure, like you said.
I like that.
So that's
good dad advice.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Mine was not advice. Mine was a story. Because I had a few things going, but to start to tell the story, I have to start with Kyle. So Kyle is my son desperately wanted a snake for his birthday. So we bought Kyle the corn snake. He's a cool little snake. Yeah. Like he's just this albino snake, orange and white. And so when we got him, before we got him, I was researching like, well, how do you take care of him? What do you feed him? And it wasn't too bad, actually. It was like, he eats like a little mouse once a week. They're like $2 at the pet store, and you buy them frozen. And I had the pet store lady had to tell me all this, how to feed him, but it wasn't complicated. It's like, you take the frozen dead mouse and you put it in the water and it thaws out. And you take these tweezers and you hold it out in front of Kyle, and it's dead, but he'll smell the blood immediately. He knows. And the first time we fed him, because I had read that sometimes they do take some work to figure it out, and they can go like a few weeks without eating, and it kind of, you're worried they might not live. But Kyle got it right away. He's like, snatched it up, coiled around it, ate it. And so we've had a couple of feedings now since we got him. So I tell you that story to tell you the story of what happened next. So then last night, my wife brought home some, I guess this would be a story where, Dad, sometimes you just do it. You just, like, you don't, maybe you're not qualified to do something, just do it. You just step in there and do it. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so my oldest son, she had some fish, like fried fish from this nice restaurant. She was like, leftovers, try some. It was really good. And my oldest son takes a big bite of it and he puts it in his mouth. I was out of the kitchen. I come back in and he's like gagging. Oh. He's like, and I'm like, what's going on? Yeah. And he's like, there's a bone. And, my wife's kind of like, I don't know, swallow it maybe. And I'm like, he's like, no, there's a bone. I can feel it. And I'm like, open your mouth. And I could see a bone like lodged as I pulled his tongue, like stuck in his throat, in the back of his throat. And I'm kind of freaking out because I'm like, he's going to swallow, like that could go through his esophagus, whatever. And then I thought, tweezers.
Oh, wow.
So I ran across the room and I grabbed Kyle's dead mouse tweezers. And I did pause, and my son's like, his head's over the sink and he's like gagging. And I'm like, wait.
You washed him.
I got the soap. Because he's kind of a hypochondriac and he would have freaked out. But I washed him really good and I was like, all right, they're clean. He's like, okay. And I did I felt like a surgeon. Totally. Like I opened his tongue. I was like, put down your tongue. I'm like, stick him in. I pull out this big bone.
I bet that felt amazing.
It did. Like everybody in the room paused and is like, yeah, I could have been a surgeon. Like
totally.
I could cut you open and pull out the bad things.
With your own kid, you feel a little more like, yeah, I can do this. You know?
I was more in the mindset of, I am not going to the urgent care right now, and I am not paying $3,000 to have somebody stick a thing down his throat and pull it. I can do it.
Yeah.
I got Kyle's tweezers. Yeah. They're big and long. I could just stick them down his throat and pull it out.
$3,000 plus your whole evening is wrecked.
It could have been, if it had been further down his throat, urgent care, I don't think I would have, I could see it.
You weren't going to cut his neck open to get it.
No, but I also wasn't going to go fishing and just he probably would have thrown up everywhere at that point.
Vocal cords, yeah.
But it was a dad. Like I think as dads, you just do it.
Totally.
You know, don't be afraid. You know, if a kid's got something stuck in their throat, just open wide, son. Yeah. Pull it out.
Totally.
Anyway.
And with that, you gave him a story he's going to be telling for the rest of his days.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he did get it out, and he's like, thanks.
I'll bet.
You're welcome.
I mean, the relief you feel when you get a bone out of your neck, that sounds...
Yeah, I could see, because I think his mom, I don't think she quite understood. Like, she thought like tiny something. Like, he was trying to tell me, like, no, Dad, there's a...
Yeah, I'm in a bad way.
I can feel like there's something there. And then when I peered inside with my iPhone light, I was like, I see a bone sticking out.
Yeah.
So...
your wife, the medical professional, just showed his shoulders.
I mean, I could tell, like, at that moment, she won't listen to this, so it doesn't matter. I could tell at that moment, it was like, she's used to handing... she's not doing the surgery. She's like, here, you take it out. Uh-huh. Like, I can sterilize it. I can give you the right forceps, but I'm not reaching in there.
Oh my goodness.
I say that, but she's done lots of surgery, so I'm sure she's pulled bones, and
sometimes it just comes down to who's there too. Like,
I think it was just alone, I saw, like, I could visualize, I could reach in there and get that. You know what I mean?
I love that you thought, I'm not taking him to the urgent care to watch some other dude do this thing that I'm pretty sure I can do.
I had that before when he was a kid.
Yeah.
Well, he's a teenager now, but he's like, my ear hurts, Dad. And I look in his ear and I see neon green.
Oh, my goodness.
And it's one of those airsoft bullets.
Yeah.
And he had just stuck it in his ear. And he's like, it hurts so bad. He was probably 4 or 5. Yeah. He's like, how long has that been in there? He's like, a few days. And I'm like, oh, crap. So then we go to the urgent care, and I'm thinking like big surgery. Like, I don't know how, because the ear had kind of swollen around it because it'd been there. And they brought out this little spoon thing. They're like, she said something like that, like, I thought, is this going to be big? And she's like, actually, this happens all the time. We have a scoop here. And it hurt to get it out, but it was like this. And I was like, well, if I had one of those, I could do that. There wasn't any magic to that. It was a scoop. Ear scoop.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's our dad stories and advice. I don't know. We'll keep this going.
Man.
I think all good.
You won with that one. I mean, it's not a contest.
It's a good story.
I don't have any stories of kids with bones in their throat.
Yet.
Well, yeah. The game pretty early.
So,
in the game.
Now that we've covered the dad advice, at the top of this, I guess we can put it in the title, but today we were going to talk about David Grusch. Now, Dave, who is David Grusch?
David Grusch. Let's see. David Grusch is, right now, if you Google UFO whistleblower,
yes,
that's the first thing you're going to find is David Grusch. Lots of, not just conspiracy theory type places like ourselves and the more notable ones, but like mainstream news sources, and like Rogan's talking about it with a lot of his guests.
Dogs coming in, kids coming in.
No. Grusch is a former intelligence officer.
You keep going.
And he's also Afghanistan veteran. But he's been in intelligence since, I don't know, sometime around, his whole career has been intelligence, but a lot of the stuff that he talks about is since around 2019.
Okay. When this, I mean, just to tee this up a little better, like there's been a lot of news happening. Yeah. So just in the past 2 weeks since our last podcast, it's almost like a whirlwind of, if you were going back to our UFO fake alien invasion podcast, and even since then, like the temperature of the conversation is turned up quite a bit. And that's why David Grusch comes into the conversation, because he's the whistleblower. And obviously, like everything you said, he's very... a buddy of mine would always say it like this. He'd say, well, if he is not an expert, can you tell me who is? So with a lot of these UFO people, especially people like David Grusch, they'll say something that's just... What David is saying is unbelievable. It is enough that you would think that people's brains would explode just by hearing what he's saying. So he's not, we can get in more into exactly what he's saying. I'm just going to make it brief so you know what we're talking about. But he is saying, as a whistleblower, as a highly ranked intelligence officer for the United States government, no bones about it, we have in our possession many spacecraft, ships, vessels from other planets that have been crashed or found on Earth. I guess sometimes they land them and they leave, and they just like, oh, here you go. And we come across it like in an archaeological dig or something. We'll find an aircraft. That's what he's saying. I mean, it sounds fantastical. And we have bodies of pilots from these crashes from other planets, not Earth. So that's pretty, I mean, even for me being somebody who has seen UFOs and obsessed with UFOs, I hear that and go, really? I mean, I was kind of hoping for like there was a crash. He's saying, no, basically every 5 years we find one of these vehicles. And he's not saying it's just metamaterials or some elements of, I mean, he says we have intact vehicles from other planets, so the whole thing is weird because, first of all, wouldn't that be like headline news? Like, wouldn't that like blow everyone's, like, why is no one freaking out?
I think the reason no one is freaking out, we've had this conversation a little bit before when you talked about like New York Times is going on with, we have aliens. That's a credible source. In this case, I thought that the Coldwater, is that his name?
Coulthard,
yeah,
I think.
Coulthard.
Australian
fella that's doing the interview on News Nation. I thought he put it pretty well where he's saying, well, look, what you're saying is that you know people who have seen, like, I know a guy who knows a guy, is basically it. And so, I mean, I'm not all ate up with the story like I want to be.
Well, no, it's more than that. He's not just saying, like, I met a guy in a bar and he told me a story. He's saying that it was his job at the Pentagon to research this topic.
Yeah.
And that as he was researching it, that individuals he did not seek out, individuals within these programs, crash retrieval programs is what he's calling them. So what he's saying is within our military system, whatever you want to call it, there is a secret crash retrieval program that has existed for almost 90 years. And he goes all the way back. No bones about it. He says in 1933, under Mussolini's government in Italia, that there was a UFO crash in Italy, and that they recovered a crashed UFO from another planet.
Yeah,
that's what the Italians said, and that at some point Pope Pius of the Roman Catholic Church knew about it, and when Mussolini's government fell in 44-45, that Pope Pius called the Americans and informed them about it, and in his words he said the Americans came in and scooped everything up, meaning the craft and all of it, and like this has been a thing, and that's I mean I think that Coulthard captured the spirit of it in the interview, because he is pushing hard, like this is what you're saying is unbelievable.
That's my point, is like why it's not getting the kind of serious attention that like people that are into UFOs seem to think that it garnered. Is, I mean, I wanted something more from Grusch than, well, I talked to people, and then people would say, well, who'd you talk to? I can't tell you.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, it's the same thing as like, I went back.
Actually, that's changed a bit.
Okay.
Just in the past couple of days.
Yeah. Well, see.
Yesterday, even, Marco Rubio did an interview with that same News Nation network. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it just seems like if you're going to be a whistleblower, like my understanding is he came out on the news because he had no choice at this point. And I'm going, okay, well, you've already decided you're going to spill your guts about this whole thing. And when pressed for details, it's a lot of, well, I mean, I can just tell you enough to like get you interested, and then I'm going to not tell you. The thought that I had was like, if I was at a party, like we got 4th of July is coming up. And last year I was at a cookout on 4th of July.
I was with you.
This is a different cookout.
Oh, okay.
Not the one. I had fun at that cookout. This is a cookout where I got stuck talking to someone.
They probably weren't talking about this, were they?
Well, but what I thought was, for some reason, I was picturing that same cookout, and I thought, God, I could imagine this guy being there and going, hey, you know, I work for the government, and people tell me about UFOs. And I'd be like, really? Oh, cool. My buddy Dante is really into UFOs. Tell me more about it. And you go,
can't really say much.
Really tell you. Yeah. And I'd be like, well, you're the one that brought it up, dude.
Yeah.
The one that really bothered me was the interviewer says, how many of these craft do we have? And then
quite a few.
Yeah, he says quite a number. And I was like, how obnoxious is this guy? So I realized that has no bearing on his credibility. And after listening to George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell today, they make the case that he is only giving out information that is like, you know, it's like declassified information, which apparently the only declassified information is very vague.
Yeah, it is. Well, but it's still bizarre that the declassified information is we have quite a number of spacecraft from other planets
It's bizarre,
and bodies of dead pilots.
I guess all of that is just to make the point of like the reason this is not like the headline news on the New York Times or somewhere that, again, more like traditional media, is he really hadn't said anything. He said, I know people that told me they saw UFOs.
I wouldn't say he hasn't said anything. He hasn't shown us a shred of evidence. Hey, if you're going to be up here, you can come sit with me, but you can't mess with the cameras.
At least with like Bob Lazar, he goes, yeah, I touched the spacecraft. Like I went to this same place all the time.
Well, I suspect that is coming. I fully maintain too that I'm very concerned that this is all fake.
Yeah.
Okay. But I do think in the very near future, you're going to get that. I think he initially came out as like a, as a whistleblower, but the problem is he doesn't really, he's a whistleblower coming forward with the kind of the approval. It seems like the approval, like the inspector general is representing him.
Yeah.
So it's like this weird, he's a whistleblower that doesn't seem to have a lot of blowback from anybody about whistleblowing. Yeah. It's almost like, which actually is more concerning because it's kind of like, well, yes, they know. Well, you have something to say about it? What do you think it is? What do you think it is? You don't even know. You're just so happy. Okay. Well, let me tell the world what I think it is. Okay. Okay. Calm down. Okay. So I forget where it's going with that. They do this to me.
He's not getting the blowback that you expect.
But I think so. Even something we talked about is just yesterday. I think that Rubio came out, and 2 days before that, Senator Holloway came out, and they again, like Grusch, they're not really saying, they're not revealing classified information, but they, Marco Rubio came out and clearly said that he backed him up and said that what Grusch is saying, he has also been briefed on that same information, and what he's saying is correct. Which would make you think, oh my God.
Yeah, Holly. I saw that response.
Who's it? Holly or Holloway? I've said Holly.
Hawley.
Holly, that's right.
Yeah, but that I thought was like point for Grusch,
Yes.
Yeah, his response is Senator Hawley's response.
All right, be good, buddy. Go get your brother.
He says, quote, I'm not surprised necessarily by these latest allegations because it sounds pretty close to what they kind of grudgingly admitted to us in the briefing. Then he said, while admitting that he can't verify Grusch's claims in comments shared on June 21, Hawley said, he's saying that the government knows more about this than they have previously let on. That doesn't really surprise me because it looks to me like the government has been tracking these UAPs for a long time now, and they've not been saying much about it. What we learned from the Chinese spy balloon incident is that one part of the government actually actively concealed it from other parts of the government because that's what they do all the time.
Well, and an element of that, the reason that we supposedly even found the Chinese spy balloon was because of changes in our policy towards tracking UFOs. And so something to do with how our radars were functioning, we changed that because of the new UFO policy.
Okay.
And then they picked up the Chinese spy balloon, which, for the record, I think it's all BS. Like, I think the whole thing is, I think the idea, like the Chinese spy balloon was ridiculous to me. It was like, well, you could see it with your naked eye. It was like, it was just floating. And the American response to it was BS too, because I mean, in Joe Biden's credit, to his credit, I think the way that we handled it was exactly the way we should, which was, let it come in. It's like everybody could see it. It's the worst spy balloon in history. If you could see it, it's not a good spy balloon. Well, once you see it, you don't shoot it down. You let them think that they're spying on you.
Right.
You let them bring it in, and then you shoot it down over water where it's easy to get it. And I mean, the whole thing, this is not me saying this, but Peter Zehan and other people have talked about like that was a huge, massive intelligence failure for China. It was not a failure for us. Like we got the balloon and we saw them every step of the way. That just shows how incompetent the Chinese are when it comes to spying on us. Which makes sense to me. Yeah. I mean, what do I know? I'm a guy that talks about UFOs in his closet.
Pulling bones out of your kids' throats.
I did save my son from a nasty
You're
bone.
pretty much a surgeon, so...
I feel like going back to medical school or something, like maybe these hands were wasted on the guitar and I could have been like...
Yeah.
Definitely would have made more money.
Yeah, for sure.
Even the bad doctors make good money.
I found out yesterday, Kokomo said you don't have to be a doctor to own a medical practice, which I'm like, no, I guess not. You don't have to have a particular type of driver's license to own a car lot, right? I mean, you're just buying the business and hiring doctors.
It's like Bill Gates. You don't have to be a doctor to tell everyone what vaccines to take. He literally owns the vaccine business, and it's like, well, he's not a doctor. No. He doesn't know anything about medicine.
No. But he can tell you to take it, though.
He knows how to make computer viruses, though.
Stupid Windows. Ugh.
That's a whole other podcast. But
it is. I didn't mean to derail you.
So the Grusch situation, I think, is not going away. I think he clearly is been given the green light from the people that he's supposedly whistleblowing on. Mm-hmm. I've just never understood. I think there's a lot of, I guess maybe some of it's that we've researched so much about MK Ultra. We've researched the lengths to which the deep state will go to do whatever the hell they want to do. And then, they'll kill the president. Mm-hmm. They'll kill JFK. And you're telling me they couldn't kill Snowden if they wanted to? I don't believe you. I really don't. Mm-hmm. I think if they wanted Snowden to be dead, he'd be dead.
Yeah.
He's not dead for some reason, but it's not because the deep state doesn't want him dead. If they want him dead, they're going to Vince Foster him. They're going to Seth Rich. There's people that are getting whacked all the time. The idea that maybe there's something where if somebody becomes so public, it's just bad PR for them to whack them.
But Epstein disappeared in a very
That's
public
a perfect
situation.
example. That's exactly what I'm saying.
I say everybody. Most people are suspicious of that, but they had the gall to do it, is my point.
I think there's probably a crisis management judgment call that's made, and Snowden is not as much. What I'm saying is the idea that we couldn't get him if we wanted to. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I believe that.
If he's going on interviews. And
yes, it goes to the grocery store. You could poison him.
It seems like you could find him. Yeah,
somebody could.
Yeah, maybe not China, but somebody.
Yeah. So I forget what point I was making about
that. What I started thinking as you were making that point was just Grusch sure seems to be. If I were concerned for my life, the thought I had while I was thinking on this the last few days and looking into it was, I don't know that I would be. I don't think I've got it in me to be a whistleblower. Mm-hmm. If I came home, my wife said, "How was work?" and I said, "Okay."
You do if you were older, though.
He's younger than I am.
Oh no, he's 37, 38. I'm saying you could be like a Philip Corso.
Okay, yeah.
You could be. You could be okay, I've got cancer. I'm not going to be here much longer. Mm-hmm. I'm spilling the beans.
I'll tell you my part. Yeah.
But there's been. I can't think of others. Philip Corso is a good example of, his book, The Day After Roswell. I read that whole book twice, and it's nuts because it's in line with what Grusch is saying. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, it's been discredited in a lot of ways. So Corso's book is talking about the same things, that we had these downed craft, that we took these craft and we started reverse engineering them through these different contracting space programs like Lockheed Martin and others like that. And in his book, he makes a lot of claims that are just easily debunked. It's I'm trying to think of a good example, but it's things like the laser that came from a spacecraft, or some of the stealth technology we use. But people have gone through and looked up and been like, no, this guy over here developed the laser. It's not, it doesn't hold water 100%, but it's also just a strange thing, because if you look up who Philip Corso was, he was a very high-ranking military officer who was in charge of the programs he said he was in charge of. Everything adds up, except then he says aliens have been coming to Earth for a long time and we got their spaceships. It's whoa, man. it's a lot to take in. And similarly to Grusch, there's no evidence. You know what I mean? Because the same thing. It's like, well, it's all
it's just a
locked
guy
up.
saying stuff.
It's locked up. I can't tell you. I can't show you the evidence, but I'm tell you what I saw. And what I saw was a spaceship and aliens. He says at Roswell they had bodies of these short, 3-4 foot tall aliens that he transported by train in formaldehyde in these little coffins back to, I forget what base it was. It was somewhere in Ohio. I can't remember. One of the big ones they used. But anyway, that's a hell of a thing to say.
Yeah.
Like, it's not... I don't know where I'm going with this, except, oh my gosh. Yeah. Does anybody else feel this way? Am I the only one out there who's like, guys, pay attention?
You're certainly not the only one that feels that way. I mean, I say a lot of, but there are plenty of conspiracy theory podcasts making a to-do about it.
Yeah, but I'm worried about the public.
Yeah.
Do you think the public is starting to go?
I think it's. I think the public's thinking like I am. Like, come on, man, you're gonna have to give me more than quite a number. And a guy came to me and told me.
Well, they did narrow it down to 12 or 15.
Okay,
so quite a number.
That's specific enough.
Then when I think it was either Hawley or Rubio said no, it was 12 or 15. Which again, it's like, which is it? I mean, if we're talking about the most extraordinary thing that like, any of us have ever seen.
Exactly.
It's like there's not one or two Eiffel Towers. There's one Eiffel Tower, and we all know where it is.
Yeah.
There's not 12 or 15 spacecraft from Zeta Reticuli.
We talk about his credibility, which from all accounts looks like he's not had any history of mental breaks. There's nobody seems to have brought up any kind of like problems with his military record and stuff. But I was talking with my wife about it this morning, and she's like, well, we know the military is not infallible. I mean, this is the same. It's not the same because this guy's Air Force and Hubbard was Navy. But she's like, I mean, the Navy let Hubbard be in charge of a ship after he fired at all those rockets from the submarine.
Or weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
Yeah, right.
And you go, well, that wasn't true.
They're not completely infallible.
Yeah.
So it is conceivable that a kooky person could make it into the ministry of, into like information services in the government. But my point being just like, yeah, he doesn't seem to have had any kind of weird gaffes, in his service at any point. Yeah, he gets to where he's like, he seems like he got promoted over and over again, right? I mean,
he was writing the president's daily intelligence briefings, which again, if he's not an expert, who is?
Yeah, right.
I mean, I'd like to know. I mean, Lou Elizondo is the same thing. I mean, people have criticized him. I mean, if you want to look at some of the critical people, Stephen Greenstreet at New York Post, follow him on Twitter. He's very critical of the Skinwalker Ranch people. He did a series on YouTube where he befriended the man that owns Skinwalker Ranch, who is a real estate billionaire that he's a Mormon. And a lot of the... Anyway, long story short, he went out there, he investigated for himself Skinwalker Ranch, and his conclusion is there's very little evidence of anything weird going on there. It's more likely that a lot of Mormons have some kind of strange beliefs about... Like that some of his Mormon beliefs are driving his reasons for doing this research, and some of those beliefs are pretty strange and not backed by any kind of evidence. And he's a Mormon too, Greenstreet. So it's like who's left the church because he doesn't agree with it, and he's really on bad terms with the people at Skinwalker Ranch now.
Yeah, imagine that. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I agree with Greenstreet. I'm not saying like I do appreciate the pushback though, and somebody that's like, look, I'm not just going to sign my deal with ancient aliens and go on a speaking circuit, which is what a lot of these people do.
Yeah.
He very easily could have. And I think instead he went out there, he set up his tent in front of the cabin in Skinwalker Ranch and waited for the giant, I think they said there was a half dinosaur beaver, like a giant dinosaur beaver that was seen on the ranch, as big as like a stegosaurus or something. That was the claim.
That sounds terrifying.
He went out there in the woods and waited for it, and he never saw it.
You'd think you'd see it if it's that big, yeah.
Yeah, but the idea is at Skinwalker Ranch is that it's like a portal, and there's things from other dimensions and other realities coming through and then going back. It's good TV. I mean, I've never actually seen the show, so I don't know, but I hear it's successful. Point being...
Now, is there a connection to Grusch and Skinwalker Ranch?
There is, and that's what initially, after this Grusch report came out, that's what I was... It's yet to be seen, but it's all going to come down to who are Grusch's sources.
Okay.
When he says that in people that are in the know within our military like generals and agency people, the people that have come to him and made these really fantastical claims, depends on who that is. Because if it's all Stephen Greer, I mean, I don't know if you know Stephen Greer, but I need more. I think that Stephen Greer is... Eric Davis would be another one. Well, Eric Davis was deeply involved with Skinwalker Ranch, and he's a physicist. But I mean, I've looked up videos with Eric Davis that, I mean, he's talking about... I'm not saying what he's talking about isn't true. I'm just saying that it's pretty far-fetched. I mean, he's talking about being at Skinwalker Ranch and a ghost pushed him down the stairs. And he's a physicist. You're like, well, where's the evidence? And he's like, I don't know. Maybe you just fell down the stairs. I mean, maybe it wasn't a ghost. I don't know. Yeah. But Hal Puthoff is another one. I've followed him closely, but if that's his, his guy, Hal Puthoff. I'm not saying they're wrong. It's just they need to go on Joe Rogan and answer some really tough questions. Like they really need to be pushed, because if Eric Davis thinks that a ghost pushed him down the stairs at Skinwalker Ranch, we need evidence for that. You can't just say it happened and it was it was a crazy story. I don't know. I need evidence. I'm not going to just believe you.
Like a lot of conspiracy theories, yeah, it's unfortunate that the waters get muddied with, here we've got a guy high up in intelligence that seems to be a credible dude, and then like people start throwing arrows at him going, well, he was hanging out at a Star Trek Star Trek conference with George Knapp, right? Who's a journalist for ufology and all that sort of stuff. And that's where I think it's real easy to be dismissive of somebody like that. Or like you're talking about these guys that are physicists saying they get pushed down the steps by ghosts. Like there's always just enough of a hiccup to where you've got pause. You start going, oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, that sounds pretty believable. You got pushed down the stairs by a ghost? Well, now I don't know if I believe any of the other stuff you just said.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. Are you going to come back in? I was playing a gig last weekend, and I went to the bar afterwards and got a drink, and it's all the people in the private party are in the other room. And obviously if I talk to a bartender, my first question is, have you ever seen a UFO?
Yeah, right, sure.
And so this guy was very nice. He seemed normal. He was about our age. And have you ever seen a UFO? No, I've never seen a UFO. And then, have you ever seen a ghost? No, I've never seen a ghost. And it was at a old golf country club. And then he's like, yeah, I might have heard a ghost at some point, whatever, but not 100% sure. So he's really kind of not engaging with it. And then he's like, well, I did see one thing once. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Get ready. So he said, well, one time. You want to hear about it? Okay. He said, one time. No one believes me, but I pulled up in front of my mom's house, and I was getting out of my car, and in the tree right next to the house, I looked up and I saw a bird on the branch of the tree, but it was a metal bird. He said it didn't have feathers. It was mechanical and metal.
Oh, no
and
way.
It made like a funny robot noise and looked at him and then flew away.
That is the opposite of what I'm talking about. That's like a super normal dude saying
That's what
the
I mean.
nuttiest conspiracy theory.
I mean. So it's like, dude, you were like, UFOs, humbug, ghost, I don't know about that. But this one time I saw a mechanical bird.
Which is hilarious.
And then it flew away.
Because, like many of these conspiracy theories, I was telling Taylor, who played drums with us last weekend.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we're kind of debriefing afterwards. And
he handled it okay?
He did all
He
right.
said he wanted to be in the band, so I guess it was okay.
Yeah, he had a great time. And I was telling him, like, well, this UFO conspiracy thing, it slippery slope, at first, like, none of it's true. And then you go, well, yeah, Kennedy assassination is a little weird. And then you're like, and his brother. And then you're like, but I mean, I know that we landed on the moon. Wait a minute.
Maybe
we did. And then, but the fake bird one is one where I took a minute to look into. I was like, okay, that one is very ridiculous.
Yeah.
But see, now you're telling me like a normal dude.
Well, I say that, but then his buddy walked by and heard him telling the story and kind of was like, yeah, this guy, I don't know. I just thought it was funny that he was like, nah, UFOs. Yeah, ghosts.
But a mechanical bird.
But I swear to God, this bird was made of metal, had no feathers. It was like, quack, quack, and then flew away.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying he was wrong. Maybe there are, if I was building spies, like, drone spies to, whatever, look over anywhere, birds would be perfect.
They would.
I mean, you make like a drone bird that like even looks, it's not metal, but like feathers. No one would even look at it.
Yeah.
You'd think, I mean, maybe that's the bird that died right behind me or whatever that one
silly,
time.
But this is the first time I thought, I don't guess they mean every bird ever. Because like when I'm in my backyard and I see birds,
well, that wouldn't make sense because that's almost a chicken and the egg kind of thing where you go, well, how did you come up with the idea of birds if they've all been mechanical?
But now that I took the time to think, a bird-looking thing.
I think that's
disguised.
Well, I could be wrong,
bird.
but I think that's what they mean is that there are birds among us that are not actually birds. They're some sort of spy. Which actually, that's not even that crazy.
No.
Like, there was a case, there's a guy that has a podcast called Everyday Spy. I forget his name, but he used to be a CIA officer, and now he has this awesome podcast. But he tells all these stories, and there was a spy cat. So we had this cat that we were training that had like a spy camera on it. I think it was in Cuba. I think it was going to like spy on Castro or something like that because there's cats everywhere. And the thing is, you can't train a cat like you can a dog. Like a dog can be trained to do all these cool things and you could do it with a dog. But cats are dumb and they don't follow, they do their own thing. And so we spent like a ton of money training this cat to be a spy. And then at the day of the operation, it was like out of a movie. It was like the guy that the cat's supposed to infiltrate and spy on. It's like he gets out of his car and the cat just beelines for the car and it gets hit by another car.
Oh, no kidding.
It's like 6 months of research into this spy cat. Wow. And it was like, well, cats can't be trained, so let's go with something else. Spy dogs.
Andrew Bustamante.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's been on Lex Friedman. I listened to
Yeah, he's really good, and he tells a lot of great stories about old operations.
He was a cool and like personable enough guy that it made me believe it made me believe in spies more, like in the way that I think like, oh, this is a guy that I wouldn't suspect of being a spy.
Yeah.
Like I would just think he was a cool guy. At a party. If I were at that 4th of July cookout.
Oh, he talked about the spy cats. This guy I'm going to talk to all night.
I would want to talk to that guy. But my luck, I'd be stuck talking to this guy saying there's quite a number of UFOs that he can't tell me about. And I'd hear a laugh across the yard, and all my buddies would be talking to Bustamante about the spy cat. Yeah.
That's funny. He, I think it was with Lex. He was talking about the Ukrainian war. And he's just coming at it from like a spy perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But this was like a year and a half ago, and maybe a year ago. But either way, he was just describing how our position in that conflict right now is definitely all to our benefit. Mm. And he was saying like, oh yeah, from our perspective, like we're sending over this equipment, they're using it, and he's saying we're gathering all the intel. And so he's saying it's a perfect storm for us because none of our soldiers are dying. No, it's Cold War. And he was saying it like it was a good thing, and I was just like, oh my God, that's really cynical.
Yeah.
Towards the Ukrainians, the poor Ukrainians are just these,
they're just
useful pawns in a war between us and the Soviets or the Russians. And I thought it was interesting. Like there's that we've talked about before. Like the soldier's got to be the soldier, and he's the spy. He's got to be the spy. And on some level, you need those guys. But I think maybe it's our job to be the ones to go, let's not kill all the Ukrainians. It's not just like, maybe this isn't all good. I don't know. Anyway, that's my one hang up with Bustamante was, what about the Ukrainians that are dying? Like, that's not good. And the Russians that are dying. I mean.
Well, you say cynical. I imagine a guy like, if you're really well informed on like the goings on in the global.
Yeah, I mean, there's this real clear, they're the bad guys, we're the good guys. I'm not saying we're not the good guys. I'm pro-America 100%. But, okay, so over the past weekend, what had happened with the civil war in Russia? With this coup? Did you follow that at all?
No.
Oh, wow. Well, there's a guy, I'm not even knowledgeable enough to tell you all of it, but there was a faction of the Russian fighting force that turned against Putin and tried to overthrow the government, and the Wagner group. And I think there was a lot of propaganda pushed behind that right away from the West to say, oh, yeah, let's, that Peter Zion guy was talking about it. And, he was very dubious from the beginning because, Putin is not as dumb as, like, people like to characterize him as like this, like, we have this caricature of him in our heads of like this dumb dictator. And it's like, no, he's been around the block and he knows what he's doing. And I'm not saying he's right or wrong, but I am, like, he did say, the guy, I forget his name, but the guy that was leading up this other faction, there's a lot of people on our side saying like, yeah, overthrow Putin. And he's like, that guy's way worse than Putin. Mm-hmm. So if you want to overthrow Putin, you need to think about who's coming in next. And that guy likes to take a sledgehammer to his, buddies' heads that he doesn't like. Mm-hmm. So as bad as Putin is, the devil is often better than the devil you don't. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of that in this conflict right now, not to get too political, but I think from our perspective, we don't even know where these places are on a map. So why would we pretend to know that we know what's best for the conflict? Oh, damn. He's got a busted snake. Mama's gonna have to fix that. Here, why don't you do this? I'll stuff it back in there, and I'll put him here on the desk by my Conspiracy Dad mug, and then we'll give it to Mom, and she'll fix it tomorrow. Okay? Sound good?
Okay.
All right. You go play with your brother. Okay? All right. Be good. We'll fix that. This is Kyle, the fake snake.
Oh,
not so Kyle, the real snake.
It's like a Kyle stand-in.
So, anyway, I guess I don't know how I connected UFOs to the war in Ukraine, but except I don't think we know what's going on.
Yeah, well, it certainly is serving as a good distraction.
Yes, I guess that's what it was. Yeah, I mean,
not only is it, just fringe ufologists and the George Knapps of the world, but it's been mentioned on the last 2 or 3 episodes of Rogan, which I know we reference Rogan a lot here, but that's only
it's been on Fox and CNN, and
everybody references Rogan. It's the biggest podcast in the world
ever,
and as far as I understand, it's bigger than CNN. Like it's a major outlet at this point. And it's common enough to where you could mention it to your buddies that aren't even into UFOs. You can go, you hear about that UFO whistleblower? And they would go, yeah, heard about it. So it's certainly like it would serve as a good distraction. And it's everything I listened to over the last couple of days did that same thing that you were talking about before.
So what do you think, though? Like, what's your opinion about this whistleblower? What do you think it's all... Are you falling more on the... Okay, I'll give you mine first. Okay, I think I'm still back in fake alien invasion territory. I do think that the UFO phenomenon is real. Mm-hmm. I think it's entirely possible that he's telling the truth about like some of what he's saying, that we do have some, maybe even a craft. But I do think it's also being weaponized, and I think it's being used as a threat as an excuse for military conflict or buildup of some kind. It's either that or it's being used to like bankrupt the Russians and the Chinese, and so now they're watching all of this, and now they're running around like chickens with their heads off trying to find UFOs because they say, oh my God, they got 12 or 15 UFOs in the United States. We need 12 or 15. And the whole thing is just a psyop to waste their time and money on things that don't exist.
The Americans have quite a number of the UFOs.
Yes. So I still think it's something like that. My best case scenario, I hope that's what it is, and it's just a psyop against our enemies. Mm-hmm. But in all reality, it could be a psyop against us. I mean, what are you going to do if Marco Rubio and some other senator come out and hold a briefing and say this is all true, and we have these spacecraft, and it indicates that there's a pending war coming our way. They're coming back, and we need to rally together to. Mm-hmm. You ever read that game, that book, Ender's Game? Mm-hmm. It's a fantastic book, but it was made in a movie too. But it's this idea that like they're coming back, and we need to build up our forces and get ready to fight them, mm-hmm. so that we don't perish. I mean, but then it's just based on, well, how do I know it's true? Watch this video.
Anymore.
I don't know. It's real.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my fear is that how do we know what's real? I don't know. I guess I could touch it with my own hand and go, okay, well, that's
as much as I'm, making fun of Grusch's just his persona. There's part of me that's like, well, I don't know what I would have him say for me to go, yeah, that guy's legit. And I think about that a lot of times.
So you're still very skeptical of everything?
Yeah, I'm skeptical of it. It bothers me, like just like that Tom DeLonge interview where you were saying Rogan laughed him out of the room. I went back and listened to it, and I thought, well, of course he did, because Tom DeLonge did the same thing. Mm-hmm. Dude, bro, I'm telling you, I have talked to people.
He did the exact same thing.
And Rogan goes, well, who have you talked to? I can't tell you. And you're like, no wonder nobody's taking you seriously, man.
That is exactly my point. Since 2017, that has been my point, because yes, I get it. Tom DeLonge is a fool. Mm-hmm. Not a fool in that like he's successful, but like he writes songs about like goofy. Yeah. He's childish. He's not a serious person in like the intelligence military apparatus sense. Mm-hmm. But the problem is all of those guys standing on stage with him at To the Stars announcement, they are serious intelligence people. And that was always the thing that got me was like, what are they doing with him? Yeah. And David Grusch, the same thing. You could say, why are Tom DeLonge and David Grusch saying the same thing? And why did Tom DeLonge say it years before David Grusch? Like, did he actually just stumble upon that? Or is he part of a bigger psyop? Mm-hmm. The fear I'd have is that he's part of a bigger psyop because he's just a rock star. He's just this guy. Like, he's not the guy that should know about any of this stuff. And
just as you were saying it, like he's just a rock star, I thought, yeah, if I were to trust, like if you're asking me who's a credible rock star that I would want serving on a UFO board, I'm thinking more like an Eddie Vedder. Like a troubled, more cerebral rock star.
At least somebody doesn't write songs that are just so ridiculous.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Like, when you say Tom DeLonge, I'm like, well, yeah, what is Kid Rock on the board also? Okay, we're just... I need a Tom York to serve on the board.
I need a Springsteen.
Right. Exactly. Some elder statesman of rock.
Well, we'll see. The good thing about this subject is we will revisit it because apparently he's supposed to be briefing Congress in the next week or two. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the Inspector General cleared him to go ahead, said it was credible enough. He needs to brief Congress. And he's doing that right now. So if the aliens are coming, I'm sure we're going to hear about it. I mean, it's a hell of a time to be alive.
We'll hear about it right before they say, okay, and in light of all this, we're going to need you to go, everybody sign up for your global identification.
Yeah.
We're all going to, to me, that's when you ask about like, what's my take on it? That's what I'm more concerned about than anything is like that sort of idea of, well, this is one way to capitalize on, get everybody on board with some kind of, compliance.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, bullets and soup is what you want.
That's
Lots
right.
of bullets and soup, and you'll be okay. So thank you for listening to the Conspiracy Dad podcast. If you like the show, please like, subscribe, share, and we will see you guys next week.